Okay, today we're going to talk a little bit about mindfulness, meditation, and yoga. And specifically, we're going to talk about, mindfulness and meditation and yoga from the perspective of how it's beneficial for supporting self-regulation in ourselves, but specifically, in our kids. So how do we use principles of mindfulness, using strategies of yoga and meditation to pursue self-awareness and self-regulation in a way that helps us regulate our emotions, respond to stress, generally, optimize our well-being and, all that good stuff that we're, always trying to optimize. How do we do that? So the first thing that I want to talk about is the distinction, right? What is the distinction between mindfulness, meditation, and yoga? So mindfulness, as I understand it, is it's a therapeutic approach. It is a set of beliefs. It is an approach that has us, really simply put, bring our attention to the present moment. So get out of our heads, get out of the ifs, the what ifs, that sort of cycle of thought that we tend to fall into either as kids or as grown-ups. Get out of the worries, get out of all of those those sort of internal contingency plans that we make where we think, okay, if this happens, then this might happen. And we sort of play out all of these contingencies in our head. Instead of that, the answer to that is mindfulness, where, we're really being asked to tune in, to be present in the moment and really just be here and now, right? That's mindfulness. And meditation is a strategy of mindfulness, okay? So it's an application of mindfulness where we, quiet the mind, so to speak, and we bring our attention to the present moment in a number of different ways. There are, guided meditations that guide us through words, through the different things we should be bringing our attention to, whether it's a body scan where we are bringing our attention to the various parts of our body and tuning in to the sensory experiences that each one, creates and offers us, or whether that is a more silent meditation where we are encouraging, our thoughts just to really quiet and to just be in the present moment. That second one can be a little more challenging, in particular for our kids, but for a lot of grown-ups too. For me, for a lot of grown-ups who identify with the idea that there's just too many tabs open in their mind all the time, the idea of quiet meditation can be really difficult and really almost off-putting. How could I possibly close all those tabs that are in my mind? The tab that reminds me of all the chores I need to do in my home, the tab that reminds me of my work to-do list, the tab that reminds me of all of the things my kids need, my partner needs, I need, my self-care tab. There's all these tabs always open, and it's really important that we learn how to, we not necessarily close every single tab, but certainly prioritize which tabs need to be open at what times and be able to shift our focus from one to the other without, trying to hold all of these ideas and thoughts in our head. Busy mind is, the analogy that comes to mind, where you just feel like your mind is busy, even when you're not stressed, your mind is busy. There's too many tabs open. Okay, so, that's sort of in a nutshell meditation. And it is, of course, a much bigger, deeper practice with, roots in different philosophies and all of that. But I think for the purpose of understanding the distinction between mindfulness and meditation, suffice to say that meditation is a way that you can pursue mindfulness, okay? Then there's yoga, right? We've heard about yoga. We know yoga. Yoga is moving your body, movement, right? But did you know that part of yoga also includes, practices of meditation? Yoga is not just moving your body. It's actually an approach to life. It's actually a philosophy that guides. It's not just about, doing these different positions that allow your body to stretch. It's also about, breathing techniques, which also relates to meditation. It's also about the philosophies and values that govern your life. All of these different things come together to create yoga, the philosophies of yoga. And yes, it is movement, and it is, stretching and, tuning into your body, but it is also an application of mindfulness because it allows you to be present in the moment. It encourages you to tune in, to listen to your body, to feel your body, and to move in a way that supports self-regulation and stress management. Yoga as a philosophy also encourages mindfulness practices like meditation, because that is one of the ways that we, pursue balanced living, right? It's one of the ways that we tune inward, is by not just tuning into our body, strictly speaking, how it moves, but also tuning into our mind and how our mind moves and how the gears turn in our mind and how our thoughts can play a role in how those gears turn. I get it. It's very nuanced, right? And when I do like a very in a nutshell version of, mindfulness versus meditation versus yoga, I'm obviously only scratching the surface. But all of this just to say that they are different, but they are related, right? So yoga and meditation can both be practices that fall under mindfulness as a practice and as an application, as a therapeutic modality. This is important because it's important for us to know, why are we doing what we're doing? Why is mindfulness important? Why is yoga related to mindfulness? How is meditation also, related to mindfulness? And maybe even how do yoga and meditation fit together to create this sort of lifestyle shift that is really at the core of, yoga as a philosophy, not just as a exercise. Okay, so that's the distinction, that's the similarities, that's the in a nutshell version. Now let's talk about some of the benefits, okay? What are the benefits of mindfulness, of meditation, and of yoga? And a lot of the benefits of all three of these overlap because, like I said, right, they all fit together to create this, really nice comprehensive way to address your body and all of its moving parts and your mind and all of its moving parts. Of course, you can extrapolate what works for you. If for you, yoga is just too out there, that's totally fine. If meditation is just too out there, that's okay. But if to you it really resonates, you can do one, you can do both, and all of that is a pursuit of mindfulness. So, what are some of the benefits of mindfulness, not just for us, but for our kids, okay? So mindfulness, and more specifically, I will unpack yoga and meditation as an application of mindfulness, has been linked to optimized learning, okay? Why? Because when we are getting in tune with the way our body works and the way our mind works, right? I said, what makes our body tick, what makes our mind tick, right? These are some of the pursuits of meditation and yoga. When we learn about how our body and our mind work, that leads to optimized learning because we become in tune, we become aware of our needs, we become able to regulate, our arousal levels, our self-regulation. Not only that, but it flips that switch, right, to regulation. And once we are regulated, we already know we learn better. So if our kids, if we practice meditation and yoga on a regular basis as a means to pursuing optimized learning, we know that there is benefit here, okay? The next thing that's really important about, outcomes of meditation and yoga is empowerment, right? It gives us skills to take back control over our body and our mind. We aren't passive participants in our life. We are active participants in our life. And meditation and yoga provide us with concrete strategies to demonstrate, that we have the power to, change how our body feels, to, build energy, to build tolerance, to build, all of these things that we strive to build through yoga and meditation. Obviously, on the other hand as well, right? Not just with your body, but giving us power and empowerment over our thoughts, knowing that we can turn on or off certain thoughts, that we can focus and shift our attention to a particular kind of meditation, tune in to the way that our body feels. All of these different things or, goals that would be pursued in meditation. Okay, the next thing. So developing self-advocacy skills. So both meditation and yoga, again, focusing on tuning inward, right? The body and the mind. That allows us to develop self-advocacy skills. Why? Because when we're in touch with our body and how it responds to stress, to joy, to all of these, these emotions and feelings that we have, we then, have that capacity to be self-aware, to identify it, and then link it with what we need in terms of a coping mechanism. So I always say to parents, we can't practice and develop coping mechanisms before we become self-aware, because it's one thing to learn coping mechanisms, like say going for a run or doing yoga, but until we recognize the body cues inside of us that say, we need a particular coping mechanism at any given moment, all the coping mechanisms in the world aren't going to do anything if you don't have that self-awareness to know, when you need to apply it. So self-advocacy skills, in that I become self-aware and then I can advocate for what I need. I can ask for, whatever it is in the environment that is overstimulating me, the lights to be turned down. I can ask to go for a walk and move my body. I can ask for 5 minutes to do some breathing. I can, step out of the classroom and, move my body and take a few deep breaths as I do that. All of these, coping skills, and we need self-advocacy, right? We need to be fluent in self-advocacy so that we can say, listen, I recognize this need within myself and I'm going to pursue it in the following ways, right? The other thing, of course, is that, meditation and yoga, they normalize mental health needs and priorities. This is super important because oftentimes we talk about body health, but we don't talk about, cognitive or mental health. Normalizing the need for proactive strategies to manage our, mental health and stress is really important. It's important with our kids, and it's important, of course, for us as grown-ups. The other piece too is that it normalizes self-care, right? It normalizes us creating, as a priority, these initiatives or these routines that prioritize both the physical and mental health, because we know that, that together creates self-care. The other piece that's really important is that it helps us connect with ourselves and to tune in, right? So, yes, of course, self-awareness, but also, the ability to reflect on how a certain situation made us feel. How did I respond in that particular meeting where I became frustrated with my colleague? How did I respond in that particular challenging moment with my child when they were, hitting all my trigger points? So that's self-awareness, and that's really important because that, again, leads to the better use, application, and, the routine maintenance of, coping mechanisms and, of course, self-regulation. The other thing that's really important that I think is often overlooked about meditation and yoga is that it brings awareness to our reflexive behaviors. Okay, what does that mean? Everything we do is a behavior, right? It's either something we do with intention, right? Or it's something that we do sort of on instinct or, reflexively. So it's like a reflex, like when, you tap your knee and your sort of leg, jumps up. That's a reflex. That's a behavior, but it's not one that you purposely did. It's just something that your body did. So, one of the most common things that we talk about when we're talking about reflexive behaviors is that fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response that we have when we're faced with stress. What does that mean? Well, a fight response is, when you get angry, when you're, you are literally feeling like you want to fight, physically, cognitively, whatever it is. Then of course there's flight, right? That's your retreat. You want to get away from the stressor. Then there's freeze, right? So freeze is going to be where you're sort of immobilized and, you may be analysis paralysis. You're not sure how to move forward given the stressor that you're encountering. And then fawn, which is a more recently explored, stress response, where essentially you move into sort of almost like a people-pleasing mode where, you sort of disregard your own values, your own needs, and you just sort of try your very best not to make waves to avoid confrontation, because historically, those confrontational situations have led to stress. So once we are aware, right, of how our body responds to certain situations, from, body cues like, sweating, flushed cheeks, those kinds of things, or even, stiff neck, muscle tension, that kind of thing. And also, mental cognitive cues, right? So like, how do I perceive certain situations in my mind when I am stressed? Am I, quicker to become frustrated by the loud volume of my kiddos who are playing? Am I quicker to jump to conclusions? Am I quicker to default to, automatic negative thoughts or cognitive distortions, right? Am I more inclined to think black and white, it's either this or it's that, without recognizing that gray area? And are any of these, coping mechanisms or adaptive, maladaptive strategies linked to levels of escalation? Oftentimes they are, right? Oftentimes when we're regulated and calm, we feel less muscle tension, we are less inclined to jump to cognitive distortions. We are more inclined to see that gray area, right? That space in the middle. And so yoga and meditation allow us to become self-aware of all of this through its practices. And then, of course, this leads to better self-regulation. The other thing that's important is that yoga and that meditation provide us opportunities to regulate attention and focus, right? So the whole idea is that through yoga or meditation practices, we are being mindful of where our focus and attention is, right? So we are, taking proactive steps to focus specifically on a particular sequence, a particular flow, poses. We are trying our best to, close the windows on other thoughts that pop into our mind. Through meditation, we are purposely refocusing our attention to whatever it is, we are trying to focus on. And when another thought comes into our mind, we simply let it float in and float out, recognizing that, we are humans, our brains are busy, we will have thoughts, but that we have that power to redirect to, whatever particular task we are engaging in. This is helpful for us. This is helpful for our kids. Why? Because a lot of the time, kids are told, you need to focus, you need to pay attention. Or we are saying to ourselves, why can't I just focus on my work when, my kids are in the background playing, or, my office is busy, or whatever it is. So these yoga and meditation practices allow us the opportunity to actually practice focus, okay? Not just beat ourselves up over not being able to focus when the stakes are high, like when we're working or when our kids are in a classroom, but providing proactive opportunities to practice shifting our attention to one particular thing we are doing. Of course, this also is an application and a pursuit of mindfulness when it comes to, being in the present moment, being in the here and now. Of course, yoga and meditation also support, anxiety and stress management, right? Because through all of the, benefits that I've mentioned already, we have the opportunity to become more aware of our stress responses and our anxiety responses, just like when I spoke about the, cognitive distortions we may be engaging in cognitively, or the muscle tension we may be feeling. All of these are, or at least could be, manifestations of our stress and anxiety. So through yoga and through meditation, we're actually able to, really dissect this and not do so in a way that feels clinical, right? Do so in a way that feels like self-care, that feels like we are tuning in and giving ourselves the power and the space to explore the connection between our thoughts and our behaviors. The last thing I think that's really important is that yoga and meditation allow us the opportunity to practice regulating our behavioral responses, okay? So we are purposeful, okay? We are present. We are doing things for a reason, and we are not acting on autopilot. And wow, that at the core is what mindfulness is all about, is not doing things on autopilot and instead doing them with intention, right? So meditation, yoga, the flows that we do, the positions we flow from one to the next, we do this with intention, and we do this as a way, to regulate our behavioral responses, to, practice, doing something with intention as opposed to doing something on autopilot. Why is this important? Well, for grown-ups, we have agency, we have control over a lot of what we do, and through trial and error, we have learned, to regulate a lot of our behavioral responses most of the time, at least let's say when we're mostly regulated, right? Sometimes regulating behavioral responses becomes more challenging when we're dysregulated, right? Which is the whole point and the whole reason we want to bring ourselves back to mindfulness. For our kids, regulating behavioral responses is a huge, goal of child development, of maturing, right? So it's not just impulse control, it's everything that goes along with, the ability to regulate your behavior in a classroom setting, in the community, in social interactions, in the family, all of these nuanced skills that we really need to practice. And in particular, if you are a kiddo that is neurodivergent, right, or your kiddo is neurodivergent, you have ADHD, you have autism, whatever it is, right, anxiety, oppositional defiant disorder, you really need the opportunity to practice regulating your behavior. And what often happens is when we don't purposely pursue, proactive ways to regulate and practice, regulating behavioral responses. And I don't just mean hitting and kicking. I also mean, being thoughtful about how we say things and what we say, and walking through, life, so to speak, with intention and not being on autopilot, then what happens is we misstep, right? And we break a rule, and then we end up facing consequences or punishments because we haven't regulated our behavioral responses. So yoga and meditation as an application for kids in particular is going to allow them this opportunity to regulate their behavioral responses. If you are a grown-up who never really had, great mastery over regulating your behavioral behavioral responses due to, a myriad of reasons, but, maybe a more difficult childhood, or even just, limited education when it comes to, self-regulation for yourself, as many of us, didn't have this kind of education available to us as kids. Yoga and mindfulness are going to provide you with an opportunity to practice this at whatever level you need to. And so those, for me, are some of the primary benefits of, meditation and yoga as an application of mindfulness.